Williams, bus operator.
Good morning, Tyrell Howard, bus operator.
Tim Roy, Chief of Transit Operations. Maurice Carter, President of APU Local 12. Frank Wood, bus operator, also the Vice President of Local 12.
Edward Dolly, bus operator.
Mike Craven, bus operator.
Anastasia, bus operator. Cornelius Berry, bus operator.
Gregory Shepherd, Capital Improvement Program Manager.
Clark Smith, Chesterfield Transportation Department.
Good morning, William Woodson, bus operator. Good morning, operator, the rail, bus operator.
Brandon Quinn, transit operator.
Thank you. All right.
Carrie.
Okay, who just came in?
Carrie.
Oh, there's Tina.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. There are no public comments, actually. Mike that came through earlier. Do have the opportunity for public comments in person, right?
We do. They're limited to 3 minutes per person, and on our first we don't have members to sign up, so it was a call to anyone who'd like to.
So if anyone would like to speak to the board, please do so. And there's the mic up there. Good morning.
My name is Maurice Carter, I'm President of APU Local 12. I represent the bargaining unit workers with GRTC. One of the first things I learned when I was elected to represent the people is that I must listen to my people, not just talk so I can only hear a session. Julie, I would like to thank you for your hoops one. In case no one has an idea what I'm talking about, let me explain. On June 13th, the union negotiating team met with the company negotiating team. What we thought we was going to negotiate a pay increase for our employees, that was mentioned at the last board meeting. At this meeting, we left the meeting with the understanding that we need to meet again on Wednesday, June 15th, after 3 p.m. Because I let everyone know on June 14th, I would be off. I had to celebrate a milestone with myself. On that day I was off, a coach came to the compensation pay for oops. This wasn't supposed to be leaked out. The leak was the company's proposal. So I guess bargaining in good faith is not meant to be allowed. I don't even have to hold a union meeting with the answer that I got from my member. In this proposal, the company say this is what the union was asking for. The only one thing the company proposed that the union asked for at the beginning of the pandemic, and the company didn't listen to it. The union would like the board to vote on the proposal today of a wage increase of $5 an operator and take the new operator start pay to 85% of the top operator. In doing this, we can again have people not be doing it and get into the GRTC instead of not doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Frank Boyd. I'm an operator as well as the Vice President of Local 1220. I was sitting down doing some research this week, and I'm pointing out numbers just like a lot of people in this room. I discovered there are 240 runs of positions that are available that we work. And of those, only 20 have early straights. And for those of you, so that you understand what the early straight is, when we come in early in the morning and work till midday. And then you have midday people that come in and work from midday to late in the afternoon. And then you have the late where the people come in the evening and work till late at night. We have 20 early straights, 13 10-hour straights with weekend. And both of these have weekends off. Then we have 13 10-hour straights with weekends off, and 21 late with weekends off. So we have middays with weekends off, and only one swing with weekends off. We have 19 extra board operators, and so that comes to 67 people, including the extra board, 87 who have the possibility of being off on weekends. And we're talking about 240 people, so that leaves us with 119 relief funds. The other runs are put together different ways. And we're having a problem getting people in and keeping them in.
and people going out. And I think the biggest problem is the quality of life for our operators that are here. In the last two classes, which consisted of 12 and 11 operators, only one from each one of those classes remained with us. I think if we approach some of the things about the quality of life, and when I say the quality of life, is because of these 240, from number 169 down to number 240, they actually have to work, some of them, and I've looked at them, there's 21 positions that actually work 2 straight, and they'll work all 2 days, and then come back, work 2 late, and then come back and work a midday, some of them, just for an example. And it makes it difficult, especially someone that's a single parent, to have somebody to juggle their children and their things around so that they can make their schedule. It makes it hard. And then I also noticed when I was looking at the numbers that some of these people are the same people that have had accidents here recently, as well as the ones with the biggest absences, because their bodies never adjust. So what I want them to do is to just take a look at these things and possibly change some things to make the quality of life, especially for those who are just entered. Listen, we came here knowing that we were gonna have to work some weekends until we reached a seniority where we can have weekends off. But that, jumping around from night to days to middays is kind of difficult. And we understand the problem they had with having people in the seat. But we need to approach some things from a different perspective. Thank you.
Other comments?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Mike Crazy. I'm a bus operator here. I've been going on 5 years. Just wanted to address a couple of things that directly affect me, as well as a few of the other operators there. That first, I'd like to pretty much piggyback on what the president and vice president spoke on about the wage increase for the operators. Last week, the pay increase was proposed to the operators through the company Facebook page. But what was omitted from the Facebook page was that the increase is temporary for the last of next year and expire next year. We're very displeased with the outcome of this, simply because it doesn't reflect the level of work that's being put in by the drivers, myself included. For the last 2.5 years, since going zero fare, work conditions have caused an increased level of stress among the operators. We've been forced to work non-traditional schedules to have these runs covered for late nights, weekends, which causes an imbalance in home and work life. The proposed pay increase also does not benefit the senior operators. Who've been here 10, 15, 20 years. Basically, they will be forced to, in order to take advantage of the increase, we having to work nights and weekends just to take advantage of that. And that's not fair for everybody at home. Not everyone wants to work nights and weekends. They shouldn't have to take advantage of the days. It should be straight across the board for everyone. As you can see, a lot of the routes were uncovered due to frequent call-outs, voluntary resignations due to operating concerns being ignored. It's been, pretty sure you've all watched the news. Everything is released to the public through the news channels. There's been, verbal attacks, physical attacks, drug use on the bus, things of that nature. Consistently going on. September 2021. Actually, go back there. We are aware that GRTC gets millions of dollars funding from the federal government, as well as other local entities here to operate the company on a year-to-year basis. September 2021, our union president presented correspondence to the company proposing a pay increase for the operators as recommended by Mayor So. This request was ignored for several months without a reply. We understand that money is not going to solve the problem, but it definitely shows appreciation for the operators for working in these conditions that we have to endure on a daily basis. Just a few weeks ago, operators came to me.
I'm sorry, sir, your time is complete.
31 seconds.
Your alarm went off.
All right, well, just to finish up here, just one, the point I'm trying to make here is operator safety and improved work conditions are our top priority. And we ask that GRTC revisit the pay increase and meet us halfway at $5 an hour bill increase.
Thank you. Further comments?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm operator Dole. I am a transit operator. I am a new transit operator. I don't have 5 years history. My comments are in no way a rebuttal or in any adversary way to the union or to the GRTC. I agree, I am a union member and I do support it. I think the perspective is that some folks got the wrong idea. This is an incentive proposal. Attendance incentive. Now, I've been asked about incentive programs since I came. I've sent emails to executives about incentive program. In your current contract, section 2A, there's a memorandum of notice from December 14th. Now, I wasn't here in 14, but since you carried it over, at least the last two contracts, it is still valid. And it states that GRTC is reviewing will continue incentive. Now, if I'm going to get paid separate, this is not within the collect CBA. This is a separate incentive program. Incentive program do work. I'm going to do the job that I'm doing anyway. So why wouldn't I take advantage of this incentive? I support the incentive program for GRTC, and we'll let the collective bargaining do what it does when it's time to do that in the fall. It's one of the things that would help get and retain, recruit, and help new operators get here. We understand that it's temporary, and let's renegotiate it in the next contract. We definitely need that. I definitely need that. You know, I come here for money. Come here to work for my family. I do my part. I'm here every day. I have zero call-outs, zero. And so I want to be compensated, or at least recognition for compensation for those efforts. So I need to thank you.
Thank you. Further comments?
Morning, I'm operator Randy McQueen. I'm not going to say anything, but I just have to pick back on what the new operator stated reference to the proposal and then an incentive package. I think it was a little muddy. The water was muddied a little bit. We're talking about two different things. There's a pay raise and then there's incentive with differentials. And I think that to combine those two things into one with the proposal, it muddies the water and it dilutes what you're trying to do for the operator. An incentive program, okay, we can implement that, but that's separate from a salary increase. Those two things are separate, and I think they should be presented separately and not meshed in together so that it muddies the water and it also gets us operators, the new ones kind of pitted against the ones who've been here for a while. And we want to continue to promote unity. So if we could have a presentation where those are separate, that would be better for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any more music? No. All right. Thank you all for your presentation. Need to have approval of the minutes of May 24th. Have you all seen them? Could I have a motion to approve, please? Second. Moved and seconded that the minutes of May 24th be approved. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. We now move to the consent agenda. Do you want to go over this? Or just list them off? Everybody had a chance to look at these.
I can take any questions if there are any questions on these items.
Everybody cool on this? All right, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Been moved and seconded, the consent agenda be approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, it's approved. Now we move to information items. First, a presentation by Von Tisdale. From RideFinders, hello, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I am both honored and humbled to share with you that RideFinders is the proud recipient of 2 FY 22 Community House Awards, of which the details are outlined on page 29. For excellence in community service for our youth sustainability outreach campaign, and the second is for excellence in corporate social responsibility for our It's a Green Thing campaign. We are delighted to be among such previous acclaimed awardees as MasterCard, Honeywell, and Toyota. So if there are no other questions, that we just want to share that with you.
Thank you very much. And congratulations
Thank
on
you
your
very
award.
much.
You all are the board of RideFinders, I think you know, as well as the board of GRTC. So
Thank you.
your organization. So. Now we have procurements from Tanya Thompson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. The procurement report can be found on pages 30 and 31 of your board packet. There are no new procurements added to this report. The only changes are updated anticipated award date. So that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions.
Y'all looked at this. Anybody have a question on these procurements? All right, thank you very much. Staff recruitment media buys, we have a new staff person here, Mike.
Carol, he comes from the seminary. He's been there since 2015 and actually has a journal broadcasting degree.
Thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Media buys will be discontinued for the month of July, with the plan to come to the board at the July meeting with a new request for media buys to begin in August. That concludes my report.
Want to say a bit about why that is, Mike?
Pardon me?
Want to say why?
If I might, yeah, Mike, thank you so much. We threw him into the wolves. He just started with us just a few days ago. So the why is that we did come to this board. The history is that you approved over $1 million worth of media buys over the past year to work on recruitment for staff. We have put those out. We've gotten a very good results from them, but with Mike here, we want to regroup, look and see how effective those have been, whether or not they're efficient in doing the job. When he has a chance to review that, then we'll come back with a new proposal for that. But because it was a set aside for new dollars to be spent in FY 23, and because FY 23 is about to begin, and because we have not asked you to actually use any of those dollars, we wanted to make sure that you were aware that those media buys will stop short term while we reassess, regroup, and then come back. Sorry.
So the commercial I heard this morning for operators would be on hold for July, and then we would make a decision next month.
Yes, sir.
So, Mike, Julie, the 1.1 million that was COVID relief funds, do you know how much of that was spent from the December beginning through June?
I believe we spent all of it. It was all spent.
So any funding for July forward would have been in the budget?
It would have been in what we've been referring the butternut box. It's that's the money that we have that's set aside of COVID relief money that's specific for earmarked, I hate to use that word, but for different initiatives that we had planned, but had not actually gotten board approval on, that we've been discussing. There was a set amount set aside for continued and ongoing recruitment efforts that would have to come before this board to be approved. We do not want to bring forward that plan until Mike has a chance to assess it.
All right, so Mike, if you can, and first of all, welcome. When you bring back the additional details, if we can ask for, in those, let's call it 6 months of advertising, plus or minus, it looks like the operator applicant total was right around 400 from those ads. And that's, I guess, what we're sourcing from when we ask them how they heard about it, they're referencing the ad. And the mechanic total looked to me to be right about 100 from those ads. Any additional tracking that we can give of those 400 applicants, how many received a phone call for an interview, how many showed up for the interview, how many were offered a job, how many attended training? Just track it down the line if possible, so we can find out what method of advertising is working. And I think the more detail we could get there would be the best if possible. Like, we all know that 400 operator applicants doesn't result in 400 job offers, right? It doesn't result in 400 people even obtaining an interview. It doesn't result in 400 people showing up for their interview. And it doesn't result in 400 operators attending class. So any additional detail down the road would be great.
If I might, Mr. Chair. That is actually the exact reason why we have pulled this for Mike to look at that data. We do have a lot of that data available to us. We have other technologies where we're putting on digital technologies, print media, and we will be looking at taking an assessment of all of those factors when it brings that proposal for you next month or month after.
So we're basically looking at the next year as well. That's what's most successful. Any other questions? Thanks, Mike. All right, we move to staff reports, and first is safety performance from Billy Carter. Mr. Carter.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We want on the safety performance report on on pages 33 through 37 of the board package. Just to go over a few changes, we did see an increase in external events that could be attributed to the increase in non-preventable incidents. Other than that, there were really no significant changes from last month to this month. And that concludes the safety performance report. Are there any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Carter? Thank you.
Thank you.
If I might hold this one. Can you confirm that the live stream is actually working on the messages that it's working on? Dexter has said that it is, so.
All right, Mr. Barham, operator staffing and performance.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, everyone. Just two items I want to bring to your attention real briefly, starting on page 38 of the board package. On-time performance. We did go over 70% for the month, which is a little better than what we had in prior months, mainly due to the construction work, paperwork ending on Broad Street. So we expected an increase in that. So we're going to keep on that, make sure that we continue to improve in that area. Staffing, we're currently at 231 full-time and 26 part-time operators. We have 28 operators currently in various stages of training. We are on pace to do a class about every month, so we have another class slated for about middle of July. So if there are any questions, otherwise that concludes my report.
How many positions are you under? How many positions are open, operators and maintenance?
Right now, like I said, we're at 231. Our budget number for this fiscal year is 275, so it's about 44. If the ticket is correct, that we're short on full-time operators. I know Tony will give the maintenance report, but I think the last time we heard we were about two short on mechanics.
We went down a little bit again on operators.
Yes, we've been holding steady in that same,
Down slightly.
yeah, with the last few months. We haven't had as many leads this past month, tracking, on a month-to-month basis. So June does look better than it has the last few months. So if that can level off as we get more people in, then of course we'll see those numbers.
Mr. Engel, you read on, it was 234 last time we were in this room. And there was 20 in training. I think that was June 6th. Is this a different training class from last time we were here?
Yes, we have classes starting, June 6th.
They're finishing up their ASCO for the gentleman in the elevator who's taking his training in the bus today's test. Is that correct? Are they all finishing today?
No, well, what happened was, I think I may have mentioned in prior meetings that, with the federal motor carriers mandate as far as the CDL testing goes, we finally were able to get that straight, just about a month or so ago. So we're playing catch up with the CDL testing. Yeah. So some of those individuals finally getting their CDL, finishing up their training. So we should have some classes rotating out over the next several weeks.
Tim, so of the number start the training classes, how many typically graduate and become operators?
Graduation rate, what you call throughput, roughly about 82%. Give or take. We were a little more than that last year, but currently we're trending about 82%.
Any further comments?
Yeah, I don't know whether you're the person I asked about this, but I know last meeting I asked about the complaint and accommodation report. Is that in this package?
No, it is not in this package. As we have discussed, we were going to bring that back this month. However, we're looking at the best way to present it. We are almost ready. It will be in the July package moving forward month to month.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what it is.
A report of the comments, complaints, and commendations. We will have that starting next month.
All right, thank you. Okay, thanks, Mr. Barr. And since I get a shot at it, and y'all are sitting in this room, a lot of you, thank you so much for doing this work. We appreciate our operators, I do. And I think it's a very special job, so thank you. Mr. Sam Sink, ridership performance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm going to be referring to the report on page 42 of your board package. Just a few quick notes about the ridership for May. The local ridership remains basically even with pre-pandemic levels. The pulse ridership remains down about 25 to 30%, kind of what we've been seeing the past few months. And on the express ridership, that continues to be down pretty significantly from pre-pandemic levels. However, staff are monitoring the ridership and the vehicle loads on the express routes as office workers continue to make that return to the office, make sure that we're still putting the appropriate amount of service out. There are any questions?
Any questions here? Todd.
So on the express routes, during COVID, we curtailed all express out of Gaskins and out of Perham and Glenside. Are we getting any requests to reinstate the express service?
I've seen one so far. So we are kind of continuing to monitor that. It is something we would like to eventually get back. But, we're kind of waiting and seeing right now.
Wait, question. So what about money that we're contributing? We contribute money for the express route, right?
It's part of it.
Yeah. So what are we doing? If we pull back on the routes, what are we doing with the money?
We consolidated those routes together. So we didn't actually pull necessarily the routes, we consolidated them to be more effective in a single route. And a lot of that also has to do with the number of operators we have available. We don't have the operators available.
So the money hasn't moved in terms of what Henrico is contributing.
Well, the money can't move under the CDT legislation. The amount of money that comes to us from each jurisdiction is set.
That's right. Other questions here?
We're still running the routes. We're just using less buses and they're going the route number doesn't change at a certain spot, right? Like the 111 went to 3B and now it's just the 111 the whole way through.
Well, that one was the 3B the whole way through.
So,
but yes, correct. In that case, that was a local service. What we found through the pandemic, what we found through the last 2 years is that the majority of the service that was having continued high ridership were the local bus services. those that provided that essential workforce where people could not telework. Those services that were the commuter express services where people could telework, that's where the ridership really dropped. And we found that the cost effectiveness of running those when we only had maybe 1 or 2 people on a bus just wasn't efficient. So we reevaluated, we consolidated the RICO routes in particular, so that we had at least one express route from each of the jurisdictions. And that allowed us to be more effective in performing our local bus services.
So first thing I'd like to request is, even when I was 10 years old, I couldn't read something this small.
That's why I have.
And
It's
but
my turn.
secondly, Sam, do we have any actual data on, or specific information on why the pulse remains at 30% below what its pre-COVID level was, when our regular routes have in fact gone up to just about where they were pre-COVID?
I mean, we can make some suppositions about it. It's hard to actually prove causality there, but we are still not running the same level of service as we were pre-COVID on the pulse. We did have to pare back a little back in the December booking, if you'll recall. We did add some of that service back for the May booking, but we are still not all the way back. So the level of service is not the same. I'm sure that the construction on Broad Street has had some impact the past few months. But it's definitely something we can look harder into and try to figure out more about what may be causing that.
I might add as well, and Sam is actually correct. We cannot prove a causation. We do plan to go forward with an origin destination survey so we can find some more of that information out. My gut tells me that as our express services are still significantly down, as the van pool is still significantly down, there are many people that are still teleworking, and the people that have not returned the pulse are the teleworkers who work with the state or the city or other places. There were people that were using it before for local, some of the students that were using it, and will be using it soon. When we see the state and the students come back, I expect we'll see that ridership go up.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, not so much a question. Sam, you're right on about the pre-pandemic stuff. The Richmond route, local fixed route, down 7,000, over 473,000. That's about as static and flat as it gets. The Henrico route up 5,000 on a 90,000 static flat. Glad to see it up. Overall, of the 560,000 riders, the 563 was our 2019 number. Over 500,000 people, that's about as flat as it gets. So thank you. And Sam, I would only ask, as you continue this report, I really appreciate you keeping 2019 in there, because that's our measure mark. So I don't know when your chart rolls to eliminating 19 and going to 20 and 21 as you move on, but please don't eliminate 19, because it's our only reference to quote unquote whatever normal was. So thanks, Sam. Great work.
Any further questions? Thank you for your report. All right, Mr. Byrd, maintenance staffing performance.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. The maintenance report can be found on pages 43 and 44 of the board package. In addition, we are currently down 19 paratransit vans for parts and only 3 transit buses for parts. We continue to reach out to the vendors for a timeline, but not established as yet.
Questions or comments? We got a lot of vans we can't get parts for, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And we're able to hold the service.
Yes, we are.
All right.
I might add to that, I really want to compliment staff on being inventive to make sure that we are able to get service out when we don't have the vans available. We've been looking at especially the paratransit service, ambulatory versus non-ambulatory trips. And I believe we have some numbers on that percentage if you question, but the vans are really important when we have people who need that wheelchair accessibility or aren't able to get in a sedan-like vehicle. Staff has been able to use some of our sedans for the ambulatory only trips to make sure that we are able to keep that coverage moving. The supply chain issue is a national issue.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Zinzarella, you are over there somewhere on my screen. Please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. On page 45 in your packet, you will find the April 2022 financial report. Similar to the prior briefings, if we go to slide 46, which is the source of funds, for the 10 months ended April 30th, revenues are unfavorable to budget by about 4.37 million on a budget of 52.68 million, or trailing by 8.29%. Majority of this unfavorable revenue performance is in the federal, it's all in the federal line, which basically is due to below budget operating expenses. As you'll see in the next slide that we pull up here, is operating expenses are less than budget by about 6.34 million. What we had talked about in the prior months is that in the month of April, we started, we received the incremental $2 million from DRPT. So that offsets some of the federal unfavorable. That's how we get to the underperformance of revenue, about 4.37 million. So not much other change. The direct revenue is still favorable, and advertising revenue offset by the university pass revenue slightly unfavorable due to the adjustments we made for COVID, as well as the scheduling incentive has been removed. Moving over to into the operating expenses, that we'll focus on slides 49 and 50. Like I mentioned before, the operating expenses are below budget by $6.34 million. And that primarily is driven by labor. Labor at the top of slide 49, you can see is 5.25 million below budget on a budget of 36.51 million. And that's driven by the vacancies. This is through April, so the numbers are just a little bit off from what Mr. Barnum and Bird had spoken of, but there's 39, through April, there were 39 vacant operators, and there were 17 vacant positions in both vehicle and facility maintenance. Majority of the labor variance, vehicle operations, 2.68 million. The maintenance section was about 982,000, and the balance was in general administrative. Very much similar to the prior month, we're favorable in our services, which is driven by the timing of our maintenance. So services is favorable about $985,000. That's driven by favorable contract maintenance on buildings, and the item that's unfavorable in this mix here is materials and services consumed, which is unfavorable at $832,000, which is unfavorable. Fuels and lubricants is about a third of it, was about $355,000. A large piece of that was the CNG true up that occurred in the February closing. That was about $186,000, but the price of CNG is up as other fuels are. We are kind of buffered with diesel because we have a contract in place through September, but we're subject to regular gasoline and CNG increases. In addition, we're seeing some pressure on the vehicle parts and equipment and other equipment and supplies unfavorabilities due to supply chain issues, as well as the cost of transporting these parts and manufacturing them as well. Similar to prior months, casualties and liability costs is favorable to about, now it's $633,000 versus budget, and this is due to the participation in the Virginia liability pool. Purchase transportation is also favorable, $394,000 due to the demand, less demand for services. And this month, just to note, is the utilities is about 50,000 unfavorable. That's just showing some of the pressure of price of electric and natural gas. Sliding over to slide 62, this is the statement of income, and on this statement of income, you can see for cumulative year to date for the change in net position for the 10 months ended April 30th, we're positive $1.5 million. And that's basically because of the DRPT $2 million incremental revenue coming in. As you can see, from the standpoint, the operating revenue is unfavorable, as we had spoken just previously. And the operating contributions are driven by the operating expenses. So when we're tallying is what we have tallying it all together, as we are forecasting probably, upwards of $3 to $3.5 million surplus for the fiscal year, based upon the incremental $6 million of DRPT operating contribution that was bestowed upon us. Moving over to slide 63, the balance sheet. The balance sheet remains strong. As you can see that the assets in the cash side and the assets are at $7.3 million. Receivables, slightly down from prior months due to the timing of submitting the federal and state reimbursements. But it's pretty strong. Moving over to the cash flow statement on slide 64. As you can see, we ended the month of April. This is April's actual of $3.644 million cash position, and we're anticipating increasing that cash position through the end of May, as well as in June. This is a function of the incremental DRPT money, but also I want to call out that in the month of June, you'll see that the vehicle purchases of the buses, as well as payment for those, in the tune of around $8 million. Moving over to the last slide, page 65, the CVTA report. This is cumulative data through May 31st. As you can see, in the month of May, we received $2.662 million worth of distribution. And that brings our cumulative amount of money being held for fiscal year 2023 to $23.4 million. So that basically our fiscal 2023 adopted operating budget of $21.4 million, capital budget of $400,000, and $400,000 for studies is all in-house in our possession and invested between LGIP EM as well as in our Wells Fargo bank account. With that, I'll conclude my report and take any questions.
Questions of Mr. Zinzarella?
With the parts that we're not able to get right now, stacking up, do we have that put into a pot for when they're available to pay them? Because if we haven't paid for them, we know we're going to need them. If we don't have a bucket of money to pull from, we're not going to be able to pay for the parts when they are available.
I believe that we would be using our 5307 preventative maintenance funds for that. Is that correct, Mr. Zinzarella?
Yes, we would use the 5307. So with the incremental money from DRPT coming in, we haven't had the need to utilize the PM for the month of April, and I don't suspect we'll be using it for May or June. So those monies will be retained for those purposes when those parts do come in.
But that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah. Further questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Zinzarella. Wherever you are. We're now going to move to some board action items. And the first appears to be a construction management, construction engineering, inspection services contract on call. Mr. Shepherd.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm actually presenting two action items. The first action item is found on pages 66 and 67 in the board packet. And this is for the on-call CMCEI services contract. Over the next 5 years, GRTC staff receives the need for significant capital infrastructure investment and construction to support existing and expanded transit and mobility services in the region. In anticipation of these needs, GRTC requested qualifications from experienced firms to provide CMCEI on-call services. Through this contract, the selected firm will provide the required services through individual task orders. Now, some highlights from the solicitation. GRTC received and evaluated offers from 3 firms. The selection committee rated the RK&K submittal as the most responsive to the request for qualifications and the needs of GRTC. By exhibiting that it and its sub-consultants have the existing in-house qualified key persons assigned to successfully perform the services required in this contract, RK&K was selected as most qualified. The term of this contract should be 3 years from the contract notice to proceed, with an option for 2 option periods. Task order 1 under this contract is the CMCEI services for the downtown Tipperary Transfer Plaza construction. These services are funded with federal, state, and local funds. As additional items are under consideration are developed, the capital funding sources will be identified.
and GRTC will request board approvals when and as required based on GRTC procurement thresholds. The minimum order under this contract is $10,000 in services over the total 5-year term. The maximum not to exceed $20 million under the contract over the total 5-year term. There is no limit to the number of task orders under this contract. Staff recommends that the board of directors authorizes the CEO to contract with RK&K for on-call construction management, construction engineering inspection service over a term not to exceed 5 years at a total value not to exceed $20 million, and to award the first task order under the contract for the temporary transfer plaza construction management in the amount of $354,757.16.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve that, and then we'll discuss it? Somebody give me a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, so you can see the recommendation on page 67. My understanding is, let me just check this out, that as in this initial one of 354,000, this gives us an on-call firm, but it still is subject for board approval on any particular task that comes up with regard to our normal criteria, which is 50,000, 100,000, anything over 100,000 takes direct board approval.
Correct.
So all you're doing is setting your company up. You're not approving every job up to $20 million in advance. Questions and discussion on this?
Have we had a contract like this in place before?
This company, I've only been here 2.5 years. I am not aware that this company has had one. I have managed them like this in the past. This is pretty standard to have it. VDOT has these in place. DRPT has these in place.
We have them in the county. The 20 million number is, it's a big number.
The reason we came up with 20 million, we have to have a cap on it. So that was required by FTA. When we look forward at the number of projects we might put in place in the next 5 years, some of those projects included a possible North South BRT, possible Willow Lawn Park and Ride, possible downtown transfer plaza permanent, possible South Side transfer plaza, possible demolition and reconstruction of the church annex, construction of shelters worth millions of dollars for the entire region. While $20 million might seem high, it is in recognition that there's the potential that we would have a significant construction package in the next 5 years. And this would be able to provide staff the necessary expertise to manage those projects.
Anything over 50 comes back, I just said, Mr. Chairman, here.
Yes.
Lastly, the 3 bids that were received, when the selection goes through, obviously, unit pricing is put into place there, I'm assuming? They bid on unit pricing, on time pricing, that's what the qualification, what's the criteria for an award?
Unit prices were included, experience, knowledge, local knowledge was definitely part of under consideration. And then just having the knowledge and background to perform services compared to the other offerers.
May I add, this is a best value procurement. This was a qualifications-based procurement, so it's 2-step. We do have billing rates. And so, of course, we don't have hourly rates because it varies by project. But what we are awarding is, the award is based on the billing rates for the different disciplines.
Thank you.
If I might add one other piece, I think that, if it's not too early to say, Adrian, about our new staff person, mentor? So it's a good, okay, awesome. When I first arrived here, we had an engineer architect on staff, Steve McNally. He left to go to another agency. He has returned to us part-time. We were very excited to have him back, but he will be with us with considerable expertise. He actually helped construct this building as well as the BRT for the system. So he will be helping to manage this contract as well as mentor our staff on how to manage this contract and to build that in-house expertise and capacity.
Yeah, Steve, most of us who know Steve from earlier. So in a contract like this, suppose on a particular job, we wanted to hire another construction management company. We're not exclusive to these people in terms of our restriction, are we?
That is correct. If we found there was a project that we wanted to go out and have a separate one, we could go out for a bid, we could go out open procurement, and that would allow us to do so. So if we had something that was major, and we did not feel that this firm was the firm we wanted to use for whatever reason, we could still go out for another.
Thank you. All right, other questions on this? Been moved and seconded that we approve this contract and specifically approve the initial use of it for the temporary transfer plaza construction management. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? It's passed. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Next one.
The second action item presented today can be found on pages 68 and 69 in the board packet. And this is for the temporary transfer center improvements, construction. One bid was received. The lowest responsive and responsible bidder is JR Caskey with a total construction cost of $2,193,000 and $751. Period of performance is 300 days. This project is funded with federal, state, and local dollars. Staff recommends that the board of directors authorizes the CEO to issue a one-time purchase order to JR Caskey for $2,413,126, which includes a 10% contingency in the amount of $219,375 for temporary transfer plaza construction improvements under a period of performance of 300 days.
Can I have a motion on this, please? Is there a second?
Okay.
All right, so, Mr. Saunders, looks like we're about to get here, huh? Yeah, it's been a while. So this is to get the temporary transfer plaza going finally. Any comments, discussion?
Three quick questions. Have we, one bidder is, it's not comfortable. Have we worked with them before? Number one, do we have a pre-project projection that this, do we know this is in the range? Any intel somebody can help us with on one bidder?
Well, we actually didn't receive bids first time we put the solicitation out there. And as mentioned earlier, staff shortages, supply chain issues. So unfortunately, because of that, we didn't receive much interest at the time. So that's why we have just one bid.
If I might add to that, there were a couple of other factors that staff went through. The first one, of course, was that the team reached out, procurement reached out to many different of the vendors around the contractor. What we also found that they were concerned that the risk was too high, that we had time frames and durations in there that would put them at risk because the supply chain, if they didn't get the materials in place, they get the concrete in place, then they were at risk. So no one bid on it. They restructured the RFP or the ITB invitation bid, and they restructured it to allow for a staggered approach so that the contractor would not be at risk with the supply chain issue. When the bid did come back in, the single bid at 2.1 was higher than we projected, which was originally around the 1.6, 1.7 range. The team then went out and checked with the VDOT and with the localities also who have experience with this type of project, and went also with our engineer of record and found that this level of escalation between the original estimate was put in place and now is consistent with what's happening in the region and the industry with supply chain and cost. So the cost is consistent. Now, experience with this specific firm, I would have to ask the team to talk about what references they have. I wasn't made aware of that.
I'm good. I got in your answer, you said that the team went out and worked with the 3 jurisdictions who do this all the time. That's the answer I was looking for. If you're measuring work like that, Chesterfield, Richmond, and that's the answer. Perfect. I appreciate that. And then my only last question is, what happens if they don't finish in 300 days?
The contract has stipulations. How would you recall the stipulation for contract?
There are liquidated damages I'd have to go through.
But there's some type of penalty for them.
Yes, and there's retainage, of course, in there as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Todd?
Who was engineer of record?
I'm gonna make my standard comment when we talk about the downtown transfer plans. It's always a temporary solution. And, you know, the 12 years I've been on the board certainly goes way beyond that. We've been talking about downtown transfer center. And we just keep coming up with temporary solutions. So I'm gonna encourage certainly all our new board members, our existing board members, our city representatives, let's figure out a way to get a permanent solution. I know things are changing all the time and we have different dynamics that affect how we need to think about this, but we could have paid for one by now probably with all the temporary work we've done. So that's my standard comment when we talk about temporary.
Thank you. That's, I want to say something like that. Lincoln was Saunders.
We've had some good options in front of us before, and you know, I know we've had various comments from members around this table about that options in the past. So the city's committed to a permanent solution that works for GRTC.
Yeah.
But we're going to need, I think, unity in getting it over the finish line.
Yeah, and thank you for helping get this temporary one over the line, which wasn't even easy at that point. But this is a big deal for Richmond, and it's been extremely difficult, as many of you know, to get here. So thanks, Gary, for telling the truth. All right, it's moved and seconded that we approve this contract to get the temporary transfer plaza going. Any further comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, it's passed. Thank you, sir, for your report.
Thank you.
Mr. Barham, award of paratransit service contract.
Good morning again, Mr. Chair and members of the board. The action item I'm presenting this morning is located in board packet pages 70 and 71, specialized transportation services. So just to give you a little background, GRTC contracts with federally mandated specialized transportation services or paratransit service for the area. And currently, they provide the service for management personnel as well as the staff, operators, mechanics, and so forth. So the contract is due to expire November 30th of this year. So February 25th, we put the service out for bid. We had 3 firms come forward. We did an initial scoring of them. They all were in competitive range. So we went forward with oral discussions for each of them. And based on the follow-up with the oral discussions, prices and so forth, we determined that National Express was the highest ranked proposal. National Express is a firm that's been around for years that National recognized based on their qualifications and references and what the committee felt would be the best service for GRTC going forward. You can see a breakdown of why we thought that they were were going to be the selected of choice. And then under the contract with National Express, it'll be a 5-year base with 2 one-year options and a 6-month option at the end if necessary. You see the cost breakdown here based on revenue hours. And this program is operationally funded by federal, state, and local funds. So the recommendation is that the board of directors authorizes the CEO to execute a 5-year agreement with National Express Transit Corporation for the provision of specialized transportation service in the amount of $40,629,497.43. And to include the authority for the CEO to execute option terms for a total contract value not to exceed $66,405,472.85 over a term not to exceed 7.5 years.
All right, you got this report. Could I have somebody move this so we can discuss it?
I have a question.
Yeah, okay.
You said that National is going to bring in their own mechanics.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't clarify that earlier. GRTC will still provide the maintenance, staffing, and so in the facility, they'll provide the manpower, operators, reservationists, scheduler, and the management staff, operations manager, general manager, and so forth.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Here's a second, please.
Second.
All right, it's moved and seconded that we award this contract to National Express Transit for paratransit services. Are there comments or questions?
Just reading it correctly, is it about a 20% increase from the hourly, 46.75 an hour, and now it's going like 53? I mean,
But
just a labor cost thing, or is it fuel cost, or
yes,
a 20% increase?
one of the issues that we're finding with paratransit is similar to what we're finding with regular bus service is that operator pay is a significant issue. The amount of funds, the pay rate for paratransit in particular has been very low. They don't have to have CDL, but they are dealing with a special population. So we have been working with our current provider to discuss how to make amendments to allow operators of paratransit service to get more money. When we put this proposal out, we specifically stipulated that we wanted to make sure that if there was a increased price, that it was focused on operator value and operator pay. This team was responsive to that. So yes, a lot of words to say that, yes, this goes to operators.
It's a labor contract, right? The units, the fuel, the maintenance, all that's still with your, it's a labor contract.
Correct.
Yeah, the pricing structure and variable cost is a big factor for that.
So those of you that are new to the board, this has been an issue for some time. We're changing vendors, and if we accept this. Gary, you know anything to say?
You know, my question would be that, you know, we've had service issues in the past, and it's felt like our hammer has not been strong enough. And so I'm kind of curious around this contract, if we have service problems, people not showing up for work, you know, other things, what do we have to push back on?
What we did in this particular contract, we did significantly add non-performance penalties, penalty language into that contract to hold the contractor accountable, to make sure that those issues are addressed accordingly in a, like you said, in a hammer approach and appropriately. Because as you mentioned, and I think Reverend Campbell said earlier as well, the paratransit service has been incrementally increasing, pretty much as we were pre-pandemic. So we got to make sure that the firm that's coming in is going to be able to match that demand going forward. Because as you see in the proposal, each year there are incremental hour increases. Basically, Commissioner, what we think is going to be projected over that time.
You give us a regular report on performance, on-time performance and other things on paratransit, don't
Yes.
you? Yeah, so we see the difficulties that we've had there over this last period.
Yes, particularly starting late last year into this current year.
Tim, any other positives you can add to the background of our potential new partner?
Well, what I can tell you is that during the oral discussions especially, you know, what we found was that not only were they responsive to our questions that we asked, specifically these challenges that we've been talking about, but their regional staff, which is, you know, a lot of them are located, you know, up in the DC area, so we feel comfortable that they can be responsive to our needs if issues should arise, being that they are a short distance away from us.
Any further questions or conversation?
So staffing wise, new company, what about the employees?
Well, the next steps, and we'll be talking with the firm here shortly after, you know, if it is approved, assuming it will be. Then we will talk about the transition period. That's why we wanted to get it done now, so that we have plenty of time going into November 30th. So the staff would then go in, the new staff would go in and do the transition as far as interviewing the current staff, transitioning over the operators, reservationists, and most of the labor, and then go through a hiring process at the same time to get us up to those hiring levels that we need. So usually when we go through these transitions, most of the folks do retain or carry over to the new firm. There may be a few exceptions, like mainly with the senior staff, because with the bid proposals, each proposer comes in with their own general manager, operations manager, for example. So we know that there'll be turnover in those positions.
Customer service isn't, I mean, it's a lot of money we're spending. So we definitely making sure that whoever comes in will provide a level of customer service that we can be proud of.
Yes, sir. Most definitely.
All right.
Can I add on to Tyrone's question there? Are there any specific service things we're gonna do differently with this group than we've been doing with our previous partner?
Well, initially, this was one of the firms that came in with a dedicated plan to address not only staffing, but overflow scenarios as well. So when there is an overflow issue, they will be responsible for bringing a subcontractor on board that meets the paratransit standards set forth by the FTA, drug and alcohol testing, so forth and so on. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure up front that we address. We weren't getting that to some degree with our current firm, so we wanted to make sure that the overflow scenario was addressed going, within this one going forward. And National Express was the only one initially that came up and said, we are able to do that, and this is how.
I have one more question, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever do any quality control stuff with the previous people? Like just call in, check, like did we have anybody, how do we gauge customer service providing from the previous group other than what we heard from the public?
Well, I will say that there is a person who is registered for this service. I won't give that person's name, but my past experience in working paratransit in Baltimore, that person would book a trip from time to time just to check to see how the CSR was responsible in addressing and answering the call and so forth, but would go back and cancel that call just to make sure that we wouldn't dedicate a ride for that trip. So there is someone, it's myself, but I don't use my name to do that. Plus our road supervision, I didn't mention this earlier, that our road supervision will be the ones that will do oversight as far as responding to issues on the street, accidents, incidents, customer complaints, and so forth.
Okay.
Further comments, yes.
I expected that National Express Transit, being in the room, is listening very closely to the concerns and comments of this board and would take note of anything that you wanted to say at this time to make sure that they are successful in our contract.
So suppose in 2 years, we find that that the non-performance and difficulties with this vendor are as bad as our current vendor has been. What recall, what option do we have? It's a long-term contract.
We have standard provisions in the contract where we can cancel at any time. Cancellation is, of course, very difficult for our own staff, for the paratransit staff, and for our riders. It is not something we would enter into lightly, but that is an option if this does not succeed. I would say that our current contract, while we have had challenges with them, I would not say that it has been, I wouldn't use the word terrible, but it has had some significant issues, and I look forward to an improved service in the future.
Thank you.
If we're gonna use mostly the same people they're already using and we're already having problems, how is that gonna work out?
Part of it will be, if I might, that the management structure, also will be changed. The responsiveness we have heard from when they did the evaluation and they checked references, the responsiveness of the new firm we hear is much higher than we have been experiencing with our current firm. That the incentive of having higher pay for the people who are working should also help to accommodate a more loyalty and dedication to the job. Having the contract with the sticks in place to be able to judge performance should also assist. So it's a carrot and stick approach to try and correct some of these deficiencies.
I just have some concerns that if we're gonna use the majority of the same people under a different company name, that we won't get a different outcome.
That will be.
And if I may, I feel that I may want to say this at this point in time. The main issue that we've been experiencing as we've been kind of talking through fixed route, and now we're talking about paratransit, is staffing. With paratransit, it's based on demand. So for an average pullout, for example, you probably, for our operation, we do about, 900 or so trips a day that are scheduled. What we do is we look and project about how many vehicles are needed to spread out through the service area to create the schedules of manifest for the operators. So on an average weekday, we probably should be having about 60 or so vehicles out there for pullout. Because of the manpower shortage, and that's really what we're talking about, is the manpower issue, drivers primarily. We've been in the 40s, 30s in terms of pullout now. So one of the biggest issues that we have to get over that hurdle in working with National Express going forward is make sure we have enough operators. That's really the biggest issue and challenge. Because I've said all the time, if you have buses and drivers, it's not that difficult when it comes to operating a transit service. It was Coles has tested 1,000 times. The people that turn the wheels and turn the wrenches are the backbone to the operation. So part of the challenge with National Express is to come in running, not only make sure that we have the current staff up to a good level in terms of wages, but to bring in more people so that we can, get the thing running. So really that is the biggest challenge. And with this increase, that addresses that.
Don't discount the people behind the telephones though.
Oh, no question, no question.
They are, the shortages in the drivers, the people, you're not communicating with the drivers, you're communicating with the people that answer the telephone.
And a lot of times,
and that's not, then those are the folk you need to look at.
and a lot of times, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
A lot of times, that communication, that may be the only person they hear from during the course of the day.
Exactly.
So you have to have patience and understanding when it comes to communicating with persons that do call in for those reservations to check on the status of the rides.
So you said National Express is in the room. If they, so hopefully they hear that. That's the biggest. I had to use a service for a family member who had dementia. I never talked to a driver, ever. It was always the customer service people. And if it wasn't for people like Joe and Ms. Tisdale and others who were helpful, some of that customer service will make you act outside of yourself sometimes. So you need nice people to try to work with you.
That service was operated in-house for many years. And he mentioned Ms. Tisdale, she ran a very good operation when it was in-house. You want to do it again?
So, Mr. Barham, because we've heard this before from Reverend Nelson and others, have you made this a point in your negotiation with National Express Transit?
Yes.
That this particular job category and the performance in it is really critical in our understanding of what we're hiring them for.
Yes, sir.
I hope you'll say it again. We're not joking here, and it's been essential. As Reverend Nelson said, he never ends up talking to the driver, but that person is the broker between the driver and the client is the critical person too.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
You asked the question about what recourse do we have if we get into this couple of years and it's not working out for us. One of the questions I've asked the finance team and the operations team to do over the next 2 years is to do an analysis of what it would take to pull this service back in-house, risks, benefits, costs, so that we can have that as a weighting factor for moving forward. There are significant risks and costs to taking it in-house. There are benefits to having it outsourced, but over the next year, 2 years, if that moves forward, you'll be able to judge the costs of the outsource and what improvements they bring versus whether or not it should be brought in-house in the future years. So that again is another stick that this board can use to make sure that the selected firm stays in line with our expectations, your expectations.
That's an interesting option when we're about to approve a 5 plus 2.5 year contract.
It's good to be on notice.
All right, any further comments? Yes, sir, Mr. Ely.
So the vehicle, providing the vehicles is GRTC's responsibility?
Yes, that's correct.
So with your current supply chain issues on keeping vehicles on the road, how does that work? For you're handing over vehicles to the company to provide a service, but if there's not enough vehicles to meet the demand, how's that addressed?
Well, we haven't had that challenge yet, and hopefully, as we move forward, we'll continue to utilize not only the vehicles, but we also have 8 sedans, which are better in terms of operating on the street and so forth. So as we get more utilization of those sedans, as Julie mentioned earlier with the ambulatory trips, hopefully that'll offset those challenges we may have within the equipment shortage.
Thank you. And to our earlier discussion, what's the percent ambulatory versus non?
Roughly about 90-10, give or take. I know when we did a breakdown this past week, I think Shirley has the exact breakdown.
That was a softball.
I know I did the analysis and said it. But I think it's somewhere around 80-90-10 or 87-13 roughly in terms of ambulatory versus maybe a little more on transit versus care on demand. I know care on demand is a little higher on the ambulatory side as well.
If I might, there's a strategy that I know Adrian will be working on over the next year, looking at our vehicle and fleets, the question about how much of our fleet is 40-foot buses on the local side, but how much of our fleet are paratransit vans on the paratransit side, and is there an opportunity for GRTC to look at a different fleet mixture, which might mean some of those paratransit vans moving over to some of the smaller fixed route, while instead of being replaced with more paratransit vans being replaced with more sedans. That could help with the supply chain issue depending on where the pressure is and the speed at which we can get sedans. We're looking at it internally. Those are things that management will be managing over the next year.
Further comments, questions? All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve this contract with National Express Transit Corporation to provide our paratransit service, specialized transportation service in the amount of $40 million some for 5 years with 2.5 years of options, giving a total of over $66 million. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The contract is approved.
And Mr.
Thank you,
Chair, if
sir.
we can say welcome to our new team.
Yes, welcome National Express Transit. We trust you've been listening to everything that's been said. Oh, y'all are that? Is that y'all? Oh, well, hello. You know what we care about. Right. Thank you. And thanks for taking this on. All right. The next conversation is about one that I didn't want to have right now. I hope to have another 1.5 years on this one, which I wouldn't even have to be involved in it probably, but here we are. Seattle thinks that our CEO is going to be, have fun dealing with their great big tunnel and all their incredible public transit stuff. And so we have to get involved in the selection process for a new CEO. For GRTC. What I'd like to look at now is the possibility of how we do the search work. And there are, a couple of options. One is we can go out and get ourselves a search firm as we did last time to search for a CEO. And that'd take about, we say about 30 to 45 days to get an RFP out. We were actually, I think, quite pleased with the person we worked with this last time. I think it cost us about $28,000. And I understand that there's some option that maybe we could do this to the HR office of one of our 3 constituent jurisdictions here as well. At least that's been discussed. So give me some thoughts on that and on how we might go.
So this is not the closed session item?
Not yet. This is process about going for a CEO.
Yeah, I successfully we have used the HR roundtable recently.
Please
so-
tell me what that is. What's the HR roundtable?
So I think it's the HR directors for, is it Hanover included too?
Hanover is included for CBTA, but
Yeah, so Richmond and Rico, Chesterfield, and then Hanover has been included most recently for CBTA.
So what do they do? Take one of their offices?
Well, they work together collaboratively to advertise and then fill applications, interview, et cetera. And I think I heard that they may include other people, it's not just the HR persons directly. I mean, specifically, but it's a group, it's a roundtable, but they have worked together to coordinate the process, and you don't have to pay a headhunter, et cetera.
We don't have to pay them.
No.
If I might ask a question, I think I wasn't directly involved in the CBTA process, but I believe that as that was moved forward, that they had one or two members of the CBTA board who helped participate and direct that process. So it wasn't independent of CBTA, it was directed by CBTA, but the resources used were the HR professionals within the region that have national level expertise recruiting for high level positions in this region. So it is a really solid option. I think the one consideration is that transit can be a very particular field, and making sure that if that is the pleasure of this board to use that resource, that they are able to reach into the transit world effectively.
My thought would just be if we tap the HR leadership, either, under one jurisdiction or under the shared management of the parade, and let them kind of make some recommendations about what additional services they would recommend, but you kind of get the base out of the HR division, right? So we know we can get position posted, et cetera. And if they recommend, we add the expertise of a transit related search firm, et cetera. I don't think it really closes the door as much as it opens it up to, having the advantage of HR expertise without relying on the in-house expertise that it may be a conflict, searching for the next director. Not that expertise would be here, but, I do think the model works from the perspective of whether it's RECA or others where each jurisdiction plays a part with some of the support services, be it procurement, HR, finance. It's certainly a model we've used in other regional boards effectively, and could be an opportunity here to not have to go it alone as GRTC's board, but use some of the resources from our jurisdictions.
Will we get a lead person from the roundtable?
I think you want somebody to be in charge.
Yeah.
So one HR director or another, I think, should be asked to be the lead and work with their colleagues, but also report to us directly as to what that looks like. And you could put, a board member or two on that kind of working group. That doesn't necessarily, I think, equate to being the interview panel, right?
Right.
It's just the process shepherds.
Have any of you all talked to your HR people about this?
At least one person that can directly talk to our HR people from each jurisdiction independently all had the same idea. So I think that collectively we're all in agreement.
Okay.
I would add that the HR roundtable, one, that again, as Mr. Nelson mentioned, has worked successfully. Two, as Lincoln mentioned, it has resources available to them from the finance side, the legal side. They can tap into staff immediately. And then, as Julie mentioned, I certainly recommend 3 members from this board, 1 from each jurisdiction, just participate in the process. The loop is closed. Super simple process, proven to be successful before, and can move the process forward at a pretty good clip.
So my thought is that, actually like what Dan just said, that we get 1 person from each jurisdiction. We have some work to do in the initial work here with the HR people to set up the process, and also to make sure that we're operating under what we want in terms of job description and salary opportunities. So what is the job we're offering? that has to be examined by some of our board with staff support. So if this is the direction you want to go, then I think we need to identify perhaps today who the 3 people will be who will work on this.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, please.
You know, and I'm very open to it. I want to hear what we can potentially do with that group. We had by far my best experience in hiring this last time around, because we had somebody who really got the culture of GRTC, really got the vision of what we were looking for, which was a significantly different kind of CEO than we had in the past, just because we needed more of that regional mobility kind of conversation versus fixed route, this and that. And we really put a lot of effort into that. And we found somebody who specialized, you know, in mid-sized city transit operations, knew what to look for. And, you know, was really not very costly. And so there was something about that process that really worked well for us because it was a fit. This is a family, you know, GRTC is a family, and it really, you know, we wanted to get someone who could elevate the family to the next spot. And it felt like we were successful in doing that. So I just mentioned that as someone who's a real transit expert who gets to know the organization and gets to know what we really need. And so that's a smaller, simpler kind of approach, but it really worked well for us last time. So that's just food for thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting, I have to echo, in terms of our last experience was pretty remarkable. And this person was extremely helpful. And it is, you know, it is a kind of a small, relatively small national market of folks who are out there who know what they're doing, who are the potential people for this. And I know y'all probably done searches in other areas too. I've done them in education. And it was really important to have the skill of somebody who knew what the field was and who the people were. I understand Lincoln to be saying that if we go with the roundtable business, that as we get into that deeper, if we feel that there's a real need for expertise that we don't have there, we might still go after a headhunter or some support from a person who's in the field. I mean, how does that strike you?
Yeah, definitely open to that. I just wanted to move quickly.
Yeah.
We just, like I said, we just hired somebody in the transportation arena, maybe not somebody running an authority. Yeah. I think the headhunter piece will work. I mean, not the headhunter piece. I think the ranch will work. It has worked for us regionally. And again, it doesn't cost, and I feel like we can move. So $28,000 may not seem like a lot, but it is more than zero. So you need a motion?
Yeah, let's get a motion to proceed with the process here. Reverend Nelson, you want to make it? You want me to invent it? Maybe you say yes to it, or
no, I mean, I'll just make a motion that we use the HR roundtable, human resource leaders from the 3 localities that are represented on this board, and to include board members as a part of the process.
All right. So could we have a second on that? Then we'll discuss it a little further.
Second.
All right. So in any case, the interview process belongs to the whole board, however you want to do that. So we're not prejudging that, and probably all will want to be involved in that. But the preliminary work of setup would be, as far as I'm concerned, with 3 people, 1 from each jurisdiction. That sound right? That's a part of this idea. Okay. So let's see if there's any further comment on this proposal?
If I might,
Yes.
recommend that the proposal be modified to include some representation of legal counsel, so that you're assured that you are, as three members of the board are meeting, that it is done properly with lawyer.
Sure. Right. Bonnie, you listening? Oh, no.
I'm listening.
All right, okay. Thank you.
She's always listening.
Yeah, she's always listening. All right. Before we get to the three-member identities, how about the concept? Are you all in favor of this? Any further comment? All right. It's been moved and seconded that we proceed with engaging the HR roundtable members from the three jurisdictions to try to develop this process for the search for a new CEO with support from the board committee. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you for that. Now, you know, as far as I'm concerned, each jurisdiction can decide who they want. I'd like Gary, if you guys are willing, from Chesterfield, I'd love to keep him on this because of his lead experience in the last search process, which I think would be helpful. But
I think the jurisdiction will make that decision, and I would offer that all three-member jurisdictions would, within a week or so, submit the name of the representative to the chair who's going to serve.
I know the jurisdiction will make it. You're right. I'm just saying my preference would be helpful to have it there.
I'd say within a week, each jurisdiction would submit to the chair. Richmond, Chesterfield, if you guys agree to that. You also don't have to have any other thoughts, but that'll be my recommendation that our next meeting is July 19th. I'd like to not wait till then. So I'd say.
Yeah, and that means that.
What did you say?
I would just say that within a week, each jurisdiction would submit to the chair the name of the person that would
Yeah,
serve on the person.
And that also means that that person, if there's stuff that's happening that you need to make sure your other people from your jurisdiction agree to, so we can keep the thing moving. We do that. I mean, obviously, we all know everybody needs to be a part of this process.
When do we decide now when we meet, or is that something that we talk about? When do we decide, you know, like
when those three people are gonna meet?
Yeah.
I think we let the roundtable group figure that out together, but we need to task that to meet by probably the middle of next month at the latest.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I would offer up our own GRTC staff, Janice or Joe, to be able to coordinate with the members to set up a time and a place that is convenient for those three selected individuals, so that y'all are not talking amongst yourselves and violating FOIA rules.
Okay, so will you give us a staff person from GRTC on this? That would be helpful.
Just to coordinate.
You know, I would hope that this committee that gets identified within a week, that Dan has just identified, I would hope that this committee would meet soon, not a month from now, but 2 weeks from now, as soon as we can get them together. And I would hope that there would be at least one key people from the roundtable that would meet with them.
And some type of feedback delivered at the July 19th meeting.
That's right, a report to the July 19th meeting. Excellent.
Mr. Chair, this may be a question for Bonnie, but if we're having one board member from each jurisdiction, is that?
Yes, it is.
It's a committee. So what happens on that? How does that work? In terms of what is it? FOIA.
So if I might, Bonnie, please jump in over me if you want to speak to this, but just for ease, how I suspect this will work is that will be publicized. We'll put it out. We'll have to put out proper notice. I believe we have to put up 3 days notice.
3 days is it?
That's for normal board meetings. For our bylaws, say 3 days. We'll verify that to make sure.
Yeah.
When you go into public session, it will be available. It will be up to the discretion of the ad hoc, whether it is in person only or in person virtual. You can make that decision. We will also make sure that you have the proper legal consultation to know when to put those discussions in closed session and when they have to be open, but we will make all that available to you.
All right, thank you. Okay, I think we know what we're doing.
So if Bonnie, I apologize, Mr. Chair. Just want to make sure that I said all that correctly, Bonnie.
That all sounds right to me, yes.
Thank you, Bonnie. We'll be counting on you all the way through. All right, any further comments on this? I think we got a way forward. Thanks, that was good. We now need a motion to go into closed session. I need somebody to resolve this. Somebody needs to make this resolution. On page 74, or 73, sorry. This is gonna be board only, no staff.
Mr. Nelson, before you make that motion, if you don't mind, I wasn't here at the first meeting and the last time I went into closed session. I just want to make my thoughts clear. Other jurisdictions can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just going to speak on my mind right now. There are times when we meet as elected officials as part of this board, where we go back to our jurisdictions, I would imagine, and have conversations with key leaders about decisions that we need to help this organization with on behalf of our jurisdiction. When we consider this closed session and your comments about board members only, I would again, I know they were voted out of the room last time. There are some key staff, I would imagine, from jurisdictions that leaders on this board might want involved in those discussions. If other members of this board think that when we leave this meeting that we don't go back and talk to our county administrators, our chiefs of staff, our transportation experts, without disclosing confidential information, that it's false. We're able to have those discussions and not blow the cover off some wild, crazy idea. So I want to make sure that this board understands my personal philosophy is when we go into closed session, individually, our jurisdictions, when we go into closed session, we are able to bring in a staff member or two who can weigh heavily into the discussion and yet still maintain confidentiality. So I was less than pleased to hear that the vote was voted down to let key officials from Richmond, Chesterfield, and or Henrico into a closed session based upon confidentiality concerns. We have discussions with our key staff in those jurisdictions all the time about major economic development deals, about personnel decisions, about billion-dollar budgets. I feel quite comfortable that if a member of this board in any of our three jurisdictions had a county administrator, city administrator, key staff member, chief of staff that needed to participate, they wanted in that meeting, I feel quite confident in that level of confidentiality. So again, there's my personal philosophy and my statement. I wasn't here 2 meetings ago when the last time I went into closed session, and I personally disagree with the vote that was held because of that. My fear of confidentiality with those key leaders is not the same. That's what was discussed.
We voted last time. I thought that was just for that specific piece. So do we need to?
Yeah, I think it was kind of something that happened quick at a first meeting, and I think there's a lot of agreement with some of what you said.
Quite frankly, I don't want to play telephone game with my key officials.
But this particular meeting, I think I was hoping that we could just basically do the board for a little bit.
If I might add the intention of the closed session. So there was confusion, and I apologize for that the last time, that there was confusion as to what was going to be discussed in the closed session. Legal counsel advised me after we had decided what we could and could not talk about at that session, which did cause some confusion with the board. I apologize for that. So that we're all clear for this discussion, the board will specifically be talking about GRTC staff and personnel issues solely that have to do with confidential personnel matters. These aren't economic issues that would affect the local jurisdictions. It is the pleasure of the board to decide who comes into closed session or not, but just to be clear that that is the intention of this session.
I appreciate the time, and I'm certainly open to my peers in the city and Chesterfield to weigh in on the issue. I would never stand between one of my peers and a key leader in their organization that they felt necessary for them to make a decision on. So that's just my opinion. I certainly welcome anybody else's thoughts.
Somebody want to make this motion so we can then do any further discussion on it?
Make the motion, man.
As far as the resolution?
Yeah, right.
No. You talking about whether or not we can keep people in there?
Yeah.
Is that the motion you're talking about?
No, I'm just saying, we got
If we make this motion
to go in closed session, that's it.
Yeah.
And if you make a motion to go in closed session, then that means that
Then we can have a discussion about that.
We're not making a discussion, we're just saying to go in closed session, not with any.
We haven't specified yet what will happen within it. All right, you want to talk about what's going to happen within this closed
I
session?
just want to know the board's perspective. I want to know my peers' perspective on that. I don't want to bring up any particular names, but if my peers from Richmond have an individual who they think is, I would like to know what everybody's thought is on that. A closed session is closed session. I'm not saying we need to have 95 people in there, but if a member of each jurisdiction, a key person is there, a key staff member is there, what is the board's feeling on allowing the person to stay there? So that conversation doesn't have to get translated down the road and lose value. That's my opinion.
Hey, Dan, just the last time we had the issue, it was a issue around the union contract.
Yep.
And so it felt a little more personal around how we needed to operate with that, but it was certainly not a conversation. And it was the first time we heard anything about any staff being in. So it was all brought on to us at one time. So we're open to certainly whatever we need to do to have, needed staff in the room in closed session.
Yeah, I would just imagine my fear is that conversation would at some point in time, our Chesterfield representative might want to have that conversation with their county administrator, or we might want to have that conversation with our county.
And I've
administrator.
signed a confidentiality agreement and all that. So I'm doing things in the appropriate manner based on what I've committed to the organization. Yeah.
So I'm a little torn on it, because on one hand, on the county side, obviously, staff are the city. Staff is obviously important to those decisions. This board is made up of a lot of local officials, but the board's not a board to represent the local jurisdictions, it's to represent GRTC. And I think that I think that in any closed session, we should be allowed to bring in an expert to the board, whether it be from your jurisdiction or not, that is specific to whatever that topic is. But that in general, we're not representing the localities here, we're representing GRTC, which is a little bit difficult for some of us because we kind of swim in two lanes. But I would prefer that if we have somebody in closed session, it's because they have expertise in the discussion that's at hand in that closed session, not just because they're part of our jurisdiction, because we don't represent our jurisdiction specifically as a board member for GRTC.
That they would be a key person you would discuss that issue with back in meetings.
And you do, I'm sorry, Megan. We are on the GRTC board as representatives of said locality.
We are, but we're here to represent, unlike our job in our jurisdiction, we're here to represent GRTC. We're appointed because we're from our jurisdiction. That's the way the bylaws are set up, but we're here to be an independent board that's not a jurisdictional board. It's a independent board that represents GRTC. And that's a little bit, it's hard because we swim in two lanes, and there's no doubt a lot of us swim in two lanes, but technically we're here to represent GRTC. So I'm not saying I want to tell you which staff members are key staff members for a particular topic. I'm saying that I would ask you that if you keep a staff member in the closed session, it's because they have particular expertise in the topic that's being discussed. That would be.
Or that we're trying to be efficient with our time and not have to go back and have a meeting just to discuss it with our jurisdictional leaders of what our philosophy and what our approach might be. I would concur that, I would concur with not including staff, just to add staff. I would include adding staff if it's efficient to the process. In a lot of these discussions that we're going to have about personnel, about collective bargaining, about weight, it all comes back to the dollars and cents that we fund from our jurisdictions. And we're going to have those conversations. I would assume you're going to have it with your county administrator, and we're going to have it with our leadership as we make those decisions. I can't speak for when.
Well, I'll just jump in. I think that I think at the last discussion, when we're talking about essentially what collective bargaining that impacts operations, et cetera, I felt a certain way about having the value of staff expertise in the room. I can also fall on the side of when we're talking direct personnel issues about specifically, we're talking individuals, but not city or company-wide impacts and policy. I guess everything has company-wide impact, but my point is speaking to individual personnel, I can be comfortable with limiting it to board only in those scenarios. And making it a bit of a call basis, but I think it's something that we're gonna have to norm around over the next few meetings and time, because you know, whether it's CBTA, this board, or otherwise, you know, I'm certainly looking to our city's transportation experts to give good guidance and make sure that I make the best decisions for the city and the board coming into it. And I think sometimes that will bleed into closed session. Sometimes it's just in our general prep and in the conversations. So again, I'm more kind of suggesting that, and I had indicated to the chair before, you know, this meeting that, you know, I think I'm comfortable in this instance, not having staff, but that's a Richmond position, not necessarily, when I say Richmond, I can't speak for Mr. Coles or Mr. Campbell, but from the city's interest perspective, I'm comfortable here. I wasn't as comfortable in the last conversation. I think we're gonna need to, again, I don't know how regular closed sessions are for GRTC, I'm assuming, but something like the union contract, you know, that has ramifications for us down the road. And so I want the team to be fully briefed.
I concur 100% with what Mr. Engel said about situational experts and as Lincoln put it. That is my point. That was my point. And in that scenario, and I was not here, I would have felt way more comfortable with an expert staff member anyway, from jurisdictions that could support. But thank you.
Yeah, I think you find that that many of us have had reconsiderations since that first meeting, Dan, and that actually Lincoln pretty much expressed the way I feel about it. That it's an ad hoc question of what you all need, what the board needs. There are times when it's just the board, and but that's a decision the board makes. So what I'm looking for, is there some consensus that we can have basically just the board here for this particular conversation, which is simply about interim staffing here? All right. So could I have a motion to resolve that GRTC will convene in the closed meeting? Somebody read this.
Be it resolved that GRTC will convene in a closed meeting pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended, the act to discuss the following matters, whichever applies, which is specifically exempted from public disclosure by the code section referred to below, discussion and consideration of personnel matter as authorized by section 2.2-3711.A.1 of the Freedom of Information Act.
All right, is there a second to that?
Second.
So I've asked that the CEO to be available to us if we need to call her for any information, and she will be nearby for that purpose. It's been moved and seconded that we go into closed session as described by Reverend Nelson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you. So that means we got to cut off the TV too, right? Yeah, Bonnie's.
interested. Hmm.
We still have two. You can open this back.
That's
up.
true.
It's 10:30.
So the good news is that the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items, we can go through them as much or as little as you want. They can all be deferred at the board's and the chair's discretion.
I'm sorry.
I was just, we were just having a comment about the time, and I was saying next items could be advanced or deferred at the board and the chair's desire.
Okay.
So
So I need a resolution.
you're live.
Oh, Tyrone, are you here?
Just like, Joe, are we video, recording?
Are we live yet? Have we got a quorum?
Yes, sir.
We do? Yes. Okay, can we have this resolution from somebody?
Whereas the Board of Directors of GRTC has convened in closed meeting on this date pursuant to the affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires certification by the board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public matters lawfully exempt from open meeting requirements of Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting, to which this certifying resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Witness following vote of board members.
Chairman Campbell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Armstrong,
Yes.
Mr. Cole. Yes. Mr. Yuri,
Yes.
Mr. Engel,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Saunders,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Great, that's great, thank you. So the next item on this agenda is essential transit infrastructure investment strategy, which is a 38 plus 24, that's 62-page report. And this is from Rachel. First, has everybody seen your picture, Lincoln?
I don't know if everybody has, but I got a picture of the red lines, bus lines being painted.
Yes,
so
we've
I'll
got
share
red
it around.
lanes now coming, beginning, right? And they're painting within the lines, right?
I saw a little bit of splash outside, but I'm sure they can clean it up.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So this item that's coming up that Raquel will be discussing
It
is
looks like
something
they
that
had
the
tape down. You sure they went past the tape?
Yeah, I'm sure they don't take that. No, they'll pull it up.
So this item is one that the staff has been working on for quite some time to bring forward. It's also being brought forward this time at the request of Mr. Saunders. And it provides a draft overall strategy for the investment of shelters throughout the region. It has some aspirational goals that I believe we can meet, considering the funding that we currently have in place and some of the funding that's in the federal infrastructure. Having this in place and having this adopted policy by the board would allow our partners to be able to work in concert with us as a strategy. It is recommended to be adopted as a draft so they can have some public comment, but it would be the direction the GRTC would move forward in accelerating shelter and stop infrastructure throughout the region.
Thank you.
Good morning. I would like to talk to you about our essential transit.
Let's get that mic to work for you.
Yeah, you're a little hidden there, but.
How's that?
Better.
All right. So this is a policy document. It's meant to codify implementation goals and strategies for the installation of essential transit infrastructure throughout the GRTC service area over the next 5 years. The purpose start off with, this definition, what are essential transit infrastructure? ETI are the free shelters, taxis, and landing pads. These are the elements formerly known as amenities. They are intended to provide comfort, convenience, accessibility, safety, and convenience to our riders. So let's move to current conditions. There are 1,609 active local stops in GRTC service area at 6% of that. Just about a quarter of those 1,600 stops currently have either a bench or a shelter. Just under 50% of those stops are ADA compliant, and I want to dig into that number a little bit. So the map that you're seeing on your screen has geography shaded blue. Those are 2010 subsidiary block groups that have a lower than 7% population that's greater than the GRTC system average. The local stops are overlaid, they're color coded green to red in terms of ADA compliance. So the green are ADA compliant local stops. The red are the ones that need significant improvement. So what I want you to take away from this map is that there exists a correlation between lower income areas and historical disinvestment in infrastructure. Now, this is a gap that we aim to close with our 5-year installation plan. So let me talk to you about our initial goals. We have two. The first is for 50% of our stops to have a shelter or seating by 2027. To meet this goal, we'll need to install at least 160 shelters and 225 benches over the next 5 years. Secondly, we will improve ADA compliance at bus stops through coordination with restrictions. I want to highlight that these are our initial goals. These are the floor, not the ceiling of what we want to do. So our implementation strategy, how we're going to reach those goals. This is just a screenshot of our new approved ETI qualification rubric. There are two elements that we consider with that new rubric: the ridership score and equity score. The ridership score is the number between 0 and 500. It is the average daily loading for each stop. It's a easy way to track how many people are using our stops every day. Secondly, there's an equity score. That's the number between 0 and 40. Local stops achieve points towards the equity score based on use throughout types of socioeconomic factors. So, for example, a stop that serves several routes is likely to be transport will receive points towards the equity score. A local stop that's in a low income such as co-op group or is next to a school will receive points towards that equity score. So as I said, these two scores are considered equivalent. At this point in our breakdown, anything between 7 or the top of our range qualifies for either a bench or a shelter. And I think the takeaway from this slide is that this is not a set in stone and all in all. This is again the conversation to kickstart our site selection. So how does this rubric play out over our current conditions? By evaluating and stopping the system against the rubric, we identify 179 additional stops that qualify for a shelter. Those are pictured on the map on the left. So you can see that everything that has a lavender dot has a shelter currently. Everything that has a red dot would qualify for a shelter under a new rubric. And then there are children emergency stops that qualify for a bench that don't currently have it. So on the right is the same situation of proceeding. These light dots symbolize where we have benches currently. All of the red dots are what would qualify under a new rubric. So this is just the first step in our selection process. Next, all of these sites will be vetted for suitability. That is your GRTC staff going out and doing physical site visits, taking measurements, and making a recommendation on what size or style PCI could be installed at these locations. Those recommendations will be approved by GRTC staff as well as by the jurisdiction. Let me pivot a little bit while we're looking at this slide and talk to you about what our game plan is for FY23. So we're looking at maps of everything we would potentially like to install over the next 5 years, but we really want to is the second part for FY 23 proposed path. These locations will be familiar to anyone who saw the shelter plan update last year. These are all in some state of progress right now. These are 31 stops that are either a new shelter or a shelter upgrade for an existing location. These kind of are in a whole spectrum of progress right now. There are a couple of new counties that are shovel ready. We would love to get those on the construction schedule as soon as possible, given your approval today. The rest range are very safe to design, so we're waiting on engineering review. Some still waiting for services will be done. So how much do our big plans cost? I have presented in the document in detail two scenarios. One is an attainable scenario that comes in at $9.11 million over 5 years. The second is an aspirational, which comes in at $14.75 million over 5 years. So both of these scenarios include shelters and trash installations and find sufficient to meet our right goals. They also include some nominal installation of landing pads. Now these are the straightforward drop a piece of concrete and a flat space where you have adequate right of way, 3 items minimum 80 compliance. Simple list. The difference between our attainable and our aspirational scenario is what we are considering holistic site improvement. These are the bigger projects that we will have to coordinate with jurisdictions to achieve because they're outside of the scope of what GRTC can do alone. They're not going to be addressing just these simple bus stops. They're really improving the entire areas to make them safer and more accessible for pedestrian providers. Just to give you a quick walkthrough, the photo picture shows the stop that will really benefit from most site improvement. We would have to do extensive site improvement. There's slopes that would need to be leveled out, probably some more acquisition to bring us into compliance. What we're really trying to do with these holistic site improvements is target those right off in the map that I showed you earlier. So funding. We have currently awarded grants to cover all of our FY 23 expected costs, and we are applying and will continue to apply for grant funding for the out years. In addition to all of the potential funding sources that we applied, GRTC has requested $3.5 million per year via the Congressional Designated Spending Program. That request was made through the office of Senator Mark Warner. These funds would specifically fund the essential transit infrastructure program. My understanding is that New Mexico County has requested additional funds for the state program. That was via the office of Representative. So risks and challenges, we are not immune to manufacturing supply chain issues that are happening globally. Permits, we are required to get site installation permit. Not necessarily a bottleneck, we just need to be aware and go into our timeline. Any site, we do expect that a fair number of our sites will run into limited right-of-way. All we can get some sort of use in our agreement. That is another sort of financial and timeline that we need to kind of restrict and add into our budget. So what are our expected outcomes? So I have a list of math on the slide. We again have the water. This time the local maps are color coded based on currently installed EPI. Those are the larger black dots. And then the purple dots demonstrate what we would like to install over the next 5 years. So if you consider those two groups together, we will see a significant increase in EPI installation, both system-wide and in those historically underserved areas. So my recommendations today, I have 3. I would recommend that the board direct staff to this policy at public comment in order that we can adopt the strategy design document. That the board direct staff to annually report on our and finally, that the board approves staff to continue with the proposed progress EPI installation. What questions?
Was wondering if we could get and if I've missed this, please get to the appendixes, we have the sites with the ETI that is currently established. I would be interested to see their equity score and, average daily ridership as part of that same spreadsheet, so that we can do analysis of kind of where, particularly when you're looking at, what do we have, what's proposed, and then look at those scores all side by side to kind of get a sense of how much of coverage we're getting there. I'm glad to know that there is some funding that can potentially support the work that we're doing as well. And while I, would be remiss, I should not suggest that we couldn't or shouldn't use some of those funds for the holistic site improvements, et cetera. But I also, know that for the city, I'm sure each jurisdiction is in the same space where we're making significant complete street improvements, where we're looking at addressing both, pedestrian, ADA, et cetera. Now, if we could get kind of the prioritized list for holistic site improvements so that we can cross reference that with where we either have projects in the pipeline, or we need to shift some of our prioritization to match. Because if we're doing it for bike and pedestrian infrastructure, we can also address transit at the same time, it becomes a win-win-win, and we can put those sites higher in our prioritization. So I think there's some more, hopefully, opportunity for collaboration with our various transportation and public works divisions, so that we can address some of your ADA needs in the short term. As we're doing projects, we're adding a lot more ADA ramps. I'd like to see us align that so that it serves our transit community effectively as well. If I can just say, and I think the plan and both attainable and aspirational are good progress. I'm going to shift to Julie here and say, would it be possible to take an even more aggressive proposal to achieving, I'm looking at what's in front of us and saying, can we go to 75% with ETI resources where, there is a minimum they bench and, up to 25% for sites like shelters. I feel like the need is there, going back to what we were talking about in the budget and some of our unprogrammed, both, the butternut box, the unprogrammed funds that are not already aligned to a early project, CPTA dollars that are over and above what we need for operations, et cetera. These are people riding the bus. These are sites and places where individuals are catching the bus. I think we are all kind of of a mind that there needs to be some infrastructure at each of these sites. There are places where that may be hard because of the right of way, and you still wouldn't maintain the stop, but it would be hard to add a bus or shelter. We can make some of those determinations, but I would like to think that with some of our funding opportunities in front of us, we could change the 5-year goal from 50% to 75%. And with my ask, of course, it would be to ask for at the July meeting to see both how you would attain it from the planning side, but also from the funding side, and not to say explicitly where that funding would come from, but look for the director's recommendation for how we would fund that and what that might mean we have to give up in other places. But I know from conversations with just with my members of the city council, et cetera, this is one of the number one priorities they have for their district, is increasing top infrastructure. And many of them, I think, would submit lists of priority sites. Granted, I prefer to use your data than that, but I think an investment here will go a long way in people's enthusiasm for the continued expanded service that we're looking to build.
I can't express enough gratitude for your comment, and I believe that is exactly where staff needs to go. This needs to be the floor, not the ceiling. I believe there's historic amounts of money available federally for this type of infrastructure improvement. It really, our barriers are our barriers. There are the ability of staffing up, the ability of getting right away, the ability to get into the supply chain, those risks that you saw. I think that those are what will keep us from aspirational. Originally, when we talked to staff, the conversation was, I want a plan where we could spend $5 million a year on putting these out there. And this is the first step towards getting there. The CMCEI contract that you approved today is going to also be critical in helping us get there. You will eventually, in the next several months, see an RFP at the street for architectural engineering contract to also help engineer these, to be able to work with city and county staff to be able to determine where we can put them. Some of the places that we have that we want to put them, sure, there's not enough right away. If when you leave today, please take a look at the corner when you go on the Belt Boulevard. There's a stop on either side of the road where myself and our operators stand in the rain. And we have been unable to get shelters there because of constrained right of way of private property. Working with the city, the counties and others and private partners to be able to put those shelters there. Those are areas where we're blocked, and that's the limitation of it. It's not going to be the money. It's going to be the partnerships we develop over the next couple of years. But absolutely, I agree with you. This needs to be the floor. It has to be the floor. And I'm not sure if we'll be ready in July, but I will push hard to see what we can get together quickly.
Please. I second that ask. I would like to see even more aggressive, but the timetable shortened with more shelters and more stops. I mean, 5 years is it's a long time. So, and I understand the planning and acquisition and all of that that goes into it, but I know for from what I've heard from my colleagues on the board, and especially for me, that's what I hear. Stops, shelters, inadequate, etc. And I think these are things that our citizens will immediately recognize.
I don't want to throw any of our partners under the bus, but I'm going to. How long did it take us to get VDOT approval of our shelter zone?
How long?
How long has it taken us to get SHPO to approve the shelters that we're looking at just for this year? So I hear you and we agree.
Okay, so you recommended three things here. I'm sorry, I didn't get them straight.
No problem. Three things. One, that you recommend this document out to public comment. Two, that you direct us to come back annually every year and update you. And three, that you sign off on what we're going to do.
Sounds like a lot more than an annual.
Yeah, I was going to say, can we get more?
And actually, I mean, without, I would also recommend we not approve it for posting as a draft until we see the stronger proposal.
Certainly, to add something that's stronger in there, so we have the attainable, aspirational, and aspirational steroids.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think if that requires board approval from a funding standpoint, et cetera, but it,
Well, could you change the attainable and aspirational?
Yes.
Just instead of having 3 categories, just have 2. Just make them both on steroids.
So the purpose of putting this to you all was for this conversation. The purpose of putting it to the public was that the public could also add those comments to it, and then it would come back to the board for a policy adoption with public comment. I suspect we'll have many of our local professionals as well as our writers who will want to comment on this. When I look at it, I think they're going to look at it and say, we want shelters everywhere. Some of what you've said, and I would love to get that on record. But we can certainly pause on it for a month, or we can put it out, get those comments and come back with all those comments. Both are equally reasonable paths forward for us to do.
I would, I feel like I could go either way as well. I mean, I think beginning public comment early is never a bad thing, but I also know that, if we already know we're looking to do something totally different, it's more transparent to just be clear, this is what we think we can do, or this is what we want to do earlier before we engage folks. There's, folks will look at this and see that their sites are not on the list. that they frequent, and if we have a chance to add them, I'd like to do it.
I recommend that we change the motion then to request staff come back with a modified proposal next month, but that you do continue to approve the 23 plan that we have progressing now.
To make that motion.
What she said.
What
Yeah,
she
you
said.
move that.
Second.
Second, all right, did you have a comment, Karen?
Well, I'm just really curious, do we have data in GRTC or data in the industry that indicates that more significant stops with shelters or whatever increases ridership?
Yes, we don't have it. I'm not sure that we have it within GRTC, but I would say that if you look across the industry, the picture of Walter, by the way, Walter's not one of my favorite pictures. That's Walter Watson. He's a U.S. vet who was standing at that stop. That's the 1C waiting for hourly service at that time. It's now half hour to get to the Veterans Hospital. We know that there is a bench and a shelter just a few blocks away that he can't get to. On either side of that, we have low-income housing on both sides of the road. But the barrier to be able to use that route, one is the frequency, but also is the infrastructure to sit there and be able to wait. And when someone has a choice, the second they have a choice to not standing, they won't stand there. If there's a bench or a shelter, they can make that choice to stay there because they're not going to stand there leaning against a ditch and leaning against time in a ditch. Yeah, it does improve ridership.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking on, somewhere around one in Chesterfield, you ride up it, there's gaps between shelters, and you're thinking there's probably a lot of people that would probably come from those neighborhoods right around those signs that would come out if there was a more substantial stop. So I just think of it in terms of our case, in terms of how we make our case to the state and everybody for funding, around all those things.
So can I ask you a couple of questions? Who pays for a pad?
That's part.
I mean, what happens is he's also standing in the dirt, in the mud, and these paths that go along roads that don't have sidewalks.
That's part of the shelter. We cannot put in a shelter without that.
Okay, so
The challenge here, of course, is
That right there is got to be created before you can.
correct.
Yeah.
So many of those places that we would want to put in shelters, pads, benches, if they're more downtown, they're in more primary corridors, they tend to have more of the infrastructure in place that we need. Not all of them do. Like I said, the one right outside of us where we are, the right of way is so narrow. That there's the only way for us to put pad or shelter is to go into private right of way area, private property. Areas like this, in order for us to put down a pad and a shelter, means that we actually have to put down stormwater infrastructure to be able to create that.
Got to
drainage.
go over the top of.
Correct. So again, the 5-year goal, the barriers to putting these out doesn't really come down to funding. It comes down to physical constraints and property constraints.
Another consideration is we often have utilities very under there.
So,
Yeah.
Utilities.
yes, yeah.
And the VI approval included, I think it's the foundation, $8,000. For the shelters that we all approved, it's like 18 inches. So now the reason's there from.
You guys making me put an 18-inch.
They're treating it as a building.
No.
Yes.
Well, actually, it's general services. But yeah, that was part of that 2.5-year process.
There have been discussions at different levels with VDOT about whether or not these are being over-engineered.
Well, there's no question 18-inch or a pad is extremely over-engineered. I mean, we're gonna need to have some conversation with VDOT.
All right,
They haven't had any records for, so they are, she said she would.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to find somebody with some more common sense, because that's ridiculous.
so, the other question is, what about trash cans? Do we always put a trash can?
At every stop?
I mean, do we put a trash can every time we put, a bench or a shelter?
And
Yes?
part of the plan, I think this is an important consideration for the board to understand that when you put these out, the way it is in the city of Richmond is there's an ordinance on the books in the city of Richmond that when you put a structure into the city's right of way, that structure becomes a property of the city. The city's responsible for the maintenance of the shelter, they own the shelter, they're responsible for cleaning the shelter, they're responsible for the trash can. When we put these out in the counties, those ordinances aren't there, however, the responsibility for the cleaning and the trash removal has been by agreement with the counties. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that the counties and the cities actually have the staff to do trash collection. And they have the infrastructure and they have the assets to do it. When I got here, we started making a little bit of a shift to that sometimes it's just, we need to treat our riders better. So we have an in-house group, it's increased our cost some, but we have an in-house group now that does pressure washing of all of these, not just pulse, but all of them. So the more we put out, the higher our costs will increase over time to keep them clean. And when the trash overflows and the cities or the counties trash pickup is insufficient, we have people that go out and help pick it up to assist that, so that people aren't seeing the trash. And that's part of the plan, but that will increase our costs. And those are things that will have to be addressed as we increase our infrastructure at all of these sites.
Okay, you got the recommendation that we move forward on, that we push this out a month so that we get this thing revised a bit before we make it public for comment, correct?
Except for the 23.
20, but we
Except for
adopted
23, but we give permission to go ahead with the 23 plan. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no, not. There are a couple more items on this thing that I would just like to put off till the next meeting, folks. All right, it's 11 o'clock. I don't think there's anything here that, that we can't afford to put off. If that's okay. And if that's all right with you, we move on with the CEO's report.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I've expected most of my comments will be addressed in the board policy items that will come before you next month. The one item, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, really does come down to the negotiations with the union regarding the pay increase. There were comments made by the members today, and I greatly appreciate that we are able to have this meeting at a time and location where they're able to have their thoughts expressed. Some of what they're saying is valid and some of it is still in, I would say, a pretty much conflict within the staff. We are not, there was a statement made that maybe we are negotiating in bad faith because we did discuss openly what our proposal was. I will want to make it very clear that that is completely appropriate for us to do so. That it is, there's nothing wrong with us providing our position to all staff and to all members, that everyone can have a chance to weigh in on it. And normally we don't do that. Normally we like to have a conversation with the senior leadership committee first. Our summary proposal was sent to the union and was also posted electronically internally in advance of when we were prepared to it. So that was a mistake. It wasn't wrong. It just wasn't the way we had planned to release it. With that said, it resulted in some very good dialogue and some very good conversation amongst staff on what their priorities are. And there is a split right now amongst staff regarding what they want and what will meet the needs of management for recruitment and retention. The proposal that we put out to the union was about differentials. It was a $2 differential per attendance. So any union covered person, maintenance, mechanic, operator, who comes to work at any point would get $2 in addition to what they would normally get for all hours worked. There was also a differential put in there for evening. Currently, there's a nighttime differential after 3 p.m. in the contract of 30 cents. This would be a nighttime differential after 6 p.m. at $1. We have heard very frequently from many of our staff that they are having to work with those split shifts and those non-straights and those evening shifts much, much longer in their career. They're not able to get to those early straights that you've heard about. So an evening differential of an extra $1 would allow those who haven't been able to select a earlier shift because of seniority, acknowledgement that those are harder shifts. This is industry standard in many, many industries. We also added a $2 an hour differential for weekends. Again, you heard that many operators aren't able to get a weekend off for Some of them as long as a decade, have been able to get a weekend off because of seniority nature. This also comes with a proposal that any of those shifts would be eligible for the overtime of that, which is time and a half. Any senior operator would receive the benefit of the $2 an hour increase and still the benefit of selecting their shifts first. They would be able to choose whether or not to stay on those early straights for their quality of life, or they would be able to choose a shift that has a higher pay differential. Or they could choose to stay on those times that have just the $2 and the straight and work overtime on the weekends, which would give them a differential of $6 an hour, even more than junior staff. So it really is weighted towards giving everyone something. It's also weighted to give new operators a 75% of what operators get. I was encouraged that the union suggested it goes to 85%. That was new, and I'm encouraged that they put it on the table. I would love to see that happen. We put it there with the idea that they would go to 75% when they first got here and 100% within a year, and that would become permanent to the contract. The rest of these proposals, we did propose that they would be there just for this fiscal year, because we need to make sure that they work and that they're fiscally sustainable. But we are going into union negotiations in 2023, so these would be prime negotiating period for the next contract. So the idea that they expire is true, but it is part of the negotiating position for the next contract. I understand that there is still considerable conversation within the union about whether or not they want to accept this or not. The counter proposal of $5 an hour for all operators is one that I do not believe is sustainable. It would cost well more than what we were able to afford this year or in coming years sustainably. It would require a future cut in pay or a future cut in operations to sustain that level of increase. We will continue negotiations with them, and we will bring back to you what the final proposal is, consistent with the window or the envelope that we discussed in private session of what we can afford sustainably. And that is a brief update about our negotiations with the union. And I hope to have a proposal for you to ratify in July that will be entirely dependent upon our ability to negotiate with the union, something they can agree to. With that said, I also want to put out my apologies to this board and to staff regarding my notice 2 weeks ago. It is one that I'm still processing myself. This company recruited me here based on a very strong position of ridership growth, a strong position of system expansion, an incredibly exceptional staff putting out this work and growing regional partnerships that were unprecedented for this region. And I didn't create those. I got to inherit those. I wish I could have done more to expand on those. I believe that this company is stronger now than when I got here, but it was strong when I got here. And I just want to express my appreciation to the prior board, to the current board coming in, and everything that you're showing with dedication makes better to the staff. And I am confident that as you select your new CEO, that they will come into an amazing organization that will continue to grow with projects like the shelter expansion. I want to say thank you personally. Regardless of the outcome of the vote in Sound Transit in 2 days. And with that, Mr. Chair and members of the board, good night.
Thank you. All right, I don't have anything to report. I think we've talked a whole lot today, but I do appreciate the work of this board and the amount of prep that folks did, so the meeting was able to go through. And I appreciate the way we were able to truncate the staff reports in such a way that important items could be dealt with, but we did not have to take as long. So with that, if there's no other business before us, this meeting closed.